Good evening. I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Friday, December 23rd. And tonight, Canadians are being told to reconsider when it comes to travel, be it on the road or in the skies. A major winter storm is hitting Ontario and Quebec, and this is prompting Environment Canada to warn against travel, as road conditions today could become dangerous. Weather warnings are in place for most of Ontario and much of Quebec. Forecasters call for heavy snow, strong winds, and freezing rain in some areas. WestJet has proactively canceled flights at airports in Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia. All right, switching gears to a look at the Canadian economy, which grew slightly more than economists had anticipated for October. This with the latest reading on real gross domestic product coming in higher than expected. Statistics Canada says the economy grew by 0.1%, which outperformed its preliminary estimate that real GDP would remain unchanged for the month. The agency says the performing arts, spectator sports, and heritage institutions industries grew by 4.7%. This comes amid more Toronto Blue Jays games than usual in October and a late start to the NHL preseason. Canada's decision to delay the expansion of MAID for people whose sole underlying condition is a mental disorder is getting mixed responses. Patients who were supposed to be included in the program starting next March have now been put on hold. One expert says the delay will ease pressure on the rushed process of developing practice guidelines for the complex cases. But another says that the government is discriminating against people with mental disorders. Meanwhile, Canada will spend about $200 million more than originally planned to upgrade its fleet of military search and rescue helicopters, with a total cost of $1.24 billion. When the project was first announced in 2018, Ottawa had budgeted $1.03 billion to upgrade the Cormorant fleet, which will include modernizing its 13 existing helicopters and buying 3 new ones. A Defense Department spokeswoman says the budget was increased after a fresh round of negotiations, and the updated amount accounts for new requirements, inflation, and foreign exchange rate fluctuations. All right, taking a look at the federal deficit now. The government posted a deficit of $200 million during the first 7 months of the current fiscal year. In its monthly fiscal monitor, the Finance Department says the deficit between April and October compares with a deficit of $72.3 billion, which was reported for the same period last year. Government revenues were up 17.6% as revenue streams continued to improve. Program expenses were down 15.6%. This is largely due to the expiration of COVID-19 measures. The Canadian economy started off the year with a remarkable recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, but heading into 2023, high interest rates are expected to take a significant toll. After taking a deep plunge during the pandemic, the economy bounced back this year with strong growth and record low unemployment. The housing market also boomed thanks to low interest rates that spurred purchasing activity. But that exuberance, along with global pressures, led to arguably the most pressing economic issue of the year, decades-high inflation. The Bank of Canada responded with one of the fastest monetary policy tightening cycles in its history, setting the stage for a rockier year ahead. All right, well, on the East Coast, New Brunswick's government has included a good conduct clause in its funding contract with Hockey Canada. This comes ahead of the 2023 World Junior Hockey Championship. Moncton and Halifax are co-hosting the international tournament, which runs December 26th to January 5th. Hockey Canada has been mired in controversy for months. It was revealed in May that the organization settled a lawsuit. This was with a woman who alleged that she had been sexually assaulted by several members of the 2018 World Junior team. A long-awaited sequel is cleaning up at the box office. Avatar: The Way of Water has now earned more than $600 million in global ticket sales since it opened last week. The Avatar sequel from Canadian director James Cameron tied with The Batman for the 4th highest domestic debut of the year. Bayern Munich and Canadian men's national team star Alphonso Davies was named Canada Soccer's Player of the Year yesterday. This was for the 4th time in 5 seasons. Mr. Davies was instrumental in helping the men's team qualify for the World Cup for the first time in 36 years. And he scored the squad's first ever World Cup goal in Qatar. He also helped Munich win the 2021-22 Bundesliga and the 2022 DFL Super Cup in Germany. All right, Forum Daily will be right back after the break with a look at energy prices and policy with Dan McTeague, Senior Petroleum Analyst at Gaswizard.ca. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Now we'll be having our weekly energy update with Dan McTeague, Senior Petroleum Analyst at Gaswizard.ca. All yours.
Well, thank you, Nima. This is really the last week, I guess, of 2022, and what a tumultuous year it's been pretty much everywhere. But that obviously doesn't exclude gasoline prices, energy prices. We've had it really good, as we've been talking about over the past few weeks. These are prices that we haven't seen going back to early December of last year. And of course, helped here in the province of Ontario and other provinces by governments moving back a little bit on taxes. But I can't imagine this is going to continue. Certainly, when the federal government plans not just one, but two carbon tax increases that are going to hit you in 2023. And so before I give an outlook on 2023, let's sort of just look at the lay of the land and say, what you're seeing right now at about 5 cents a liter. So it doesn't really matter where you are. As early as Christmas Day, Sunday, you're going to see gas prices move up 4 to 5 cents a liter across the country. And yes, even the regulated maritime provinces are going to see that come the end of the week. But this comes at a time in which, while many of us are struggling to make ends meet, we see energy inflation creating overall inflation, in which the Bank of Canada is responding by trying to increase interest rates to respond to that inflation. And of course, the deflationary effect it's having on the Canadian dollar. It takes 135 and a half, 136 pennies to buy a US dollar. Despite oil moving to what looks like about $90 a barrel, it's pretty clear that when you consider the overall impact of the weak Canadian dollar, that it's adding, mightily to that inflationary fight. It's interesting, Nima, that we have so many talking heads out there, mentioning inflation, but refusing to acknowledge that green policies are driving this. And while we're at it, the federal government isn't just satisfied with two carbon taxes, isn't satisfied with the emission caps, which are going to stop the Canadian economy dead in its tracks, destroy the revenue coming from the oil and gas sector, which is by far, in a way, the most prosperous. It's the biggest exporter that we have. They now want to make sure that you and I are driving electric vehicles. I just want to ask a question, because I drive a lot from here to Peterborough, from Toronto to Peterborough all the time. I'm going to be heading up there. I don't see a lot of electric vehicles right now working. And I certainly don't see them in Western Canada, where temperatures have plummeted to minus 30, minus 40 in some cases. The reality is that what people want in terms of what the government's seeking is simply not practical. And for an economy like ours, for a country that is the coldest anywhere in the world by far, it's clear that the technology and the wishful thinking are going to eventually conflict with the public's interest. You cannot have the economy come to a standstill. Electric vehicles, as they were in the 1920s, when people walked away from them, are not ready for prime time. We don't have battery storage capabilities. We're going to be using a lot of minerals. We're going to be using a lot of other forms of energy in order to extract those minerals. And of course, countries like China and the Democratic Republic of Congo, where children have to extract cobalt by hand. I want to thank woke Canadians for this. Now, I realize for some people this will be controversial, but I've worked in the automotive industry. It's public relations for Toyota for many years. The number one manufacturer of vehicles in this world is not interested in going down the EV craze. And that's exactly what it is. If Canada wants to become like California, be cool and trendy, then get the weather you have in California. And oh, by the way, they did have blackouts and brownouts. And of course, last summer, we saw several occasions where the state pleaded with EV drivers not to plug in because the grid couldn't handle it. We'll discuss a little bit more of that in 2023, but I think people had best be prepared for what is going to be a pretty significant rise in energy prices. As far as diesel, oil, and gasoline are concerned, January looks like about a net increase of 10 to 15 cents a liter, even higher for diesel. And so as we end 2022, a great year of trying to recover, we know that inflation and other factors are really driving a lot of consumers to the point where they have to consider how they're going to manage to make ends meet. In 2023, that struggle is going to continue, and don't take my word for it. We've mentioned it many, many times here. that we are going to see a rather interesting increase in prices for energy. We've also pointed out that energy prices cannot remain this low given the fundamentals of divestment over the past 12 to 14 years. All of those proverbial chickens are coming home to roost. They're coming in the form of much higher prices, Nima. So as we head to 2023, best wishes to you and all of your viewers, and we look forward to providing updates in terms of gas prices for 2023, as well as energy prices. And remember, of course, at the end of the day, those prices tend to be very, very much in a state of flux. We'll see you next year. Thanks for having me again, Nima.
All right, thanks for that, Dan. Again, that was Dan McTeague, Senior Petroleum Analyst at Gaswizard.ca. All right, stay tuned. When we come back from the break, we'll be speaking with Catherine Murray, host of The Buck Stops Here. She's going to give us our weekly crypto and digital asset update. More news to come after that, so stay with us. Forum Daily will be right back after the break. Welcome back. Now it's time for our weekly crypto and digital asset update with Catherine Murray, host of The Buck Stops Here. Take it away, Catherine.
Thanks, Nima. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your weekly crypto and digital asset update. I'm Catherine Murray. We do continue to see Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies trade relatively unchanged today, but there has been quite a bit of movement this week in line with the equity markets, where we've seen some nice rallies, but also some big drawdowns. In other words, there's a lot of volatility still in the markets with respect to risk assets. Adding on to the pressure to the downside as it relates to cryptocurrencies, of course, the FTX fallout has really weighed on investor sentiment within the space. So that's another added pressure to the downside for cryptocurrencies. Having said that, the market cap right now for cryptocurrencies stands at $740 billion. Recall the height was 3.1 trillion, around that level. So significant declines within the cryptocurrency values. And again, of course, the FTX fallout is weighing on the price of cryptocurrencies as well. Bitcoin is still the dominant at about 41% of the total market cap, and Ether's at about 18%. So no real change there in terms of the dominance. Cryptocurrencies, of course, well, Bitcoin in particular, is trading around 16,000 right now. It looks to be down by about 4% week over week. We're also, of course, keeping our eyes on the FTX fallout. There continues to be many developments there. Two of the FTX founders and also Sam Bankman-Fried's closest associates have pled guilty to fraud and are cooperating with authorities. Former Alameda CEO Carolyn Ellison, who's also been romantically linked to SBF in the past, has pled guilty. As the CEO of the FTX trading affiliate, she apparently used FTX customer assets to pay Alameda's debts and diverted billions of dollars of depositors' money to the company to fill the hole that was caused by the cryptocurrency collapse earlier this year. That was in May, of course. That's according to the SEC complaint. The SEC claims that Ellison and SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, schemed to manipulate the price of FTT, which was the token issued by FTX. Their trading arm, which is Alameda, had taken out large loans that were underpinned by the value of FTT, the token, again, that was issued by FTX. SEC's Gary Gensler said that artificially supporting the price served to prop up the value of their house of cards. So again, that is according to the SEC. The CTO, Chief Technology Officer Gary Wang, also pled guilty earlier this week. And the charges here for Ellison, about seven charges of fraud. The maximum penalty there apparently is 110 years in prison. But both of these individuals are cooperating with authorities, and so therefore perhaps less penalty going forward for them. Meanwhile, this week, Sam Bankman-Fried was released on a $250 million bond package. He was extradited to the United States from the Bahamas yesterday. The U.S. attorney said that last week we announced charges against SBF for a sweeping fraud scheme that contributed to FTX's collapse and for a campaign finance scheme that sought to influence public policy in Washington, D.C. So again, a lot to follow here. The top creditors are estimated to be owed about $3.1 billion, and at least $8 billion worth of assets are missing. Interestingly, on that note, as it relates to the creditors and who these investors are, a judge agreed to allow media organizations to intervene in the FTX case and argue to have creditors' names revealed. We'll see where that goes. Meanwhile, aside from all of that, we are also hearing that the art auction house Christie's saw a 96% drop in NFT sales in 2022 versus 2021. So 5.9 million this year versus 69 million last year. Remember last year was all about the NFTs. Nima, I'll leave it there. Back to you.
All right, thanks for that, Catherine. Again, that was Catherine Murray, host of The Buck Stops Here, which airs on Sundays at 9 a.m. Eastern only on the News Forum network. All right, well, meanwhile, it looks like retailers in the U.S. have scored a win in the government-wide spending bill. The $1.7 trillion funding package contains legislation that will force online marketplaces like Amazon and Facebook to verify high-volume sellers. Brick-and-mortar retailers have been voicing concerns about the amount of goods being stolen from their stores and subsequently sold online. The bill would compel online marketplaces to verify several types of information from sellers who make at least 200 unique sales and earn a minimum of $5,000 in a given year. Stay with us. Forum Daily will be right back after a short break. We'll be right back. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has returned to his nation's capital following his wartime visit to the United States. Mr. Zelensky's return was capped with a speech where he says forces are, quote, working toward victory. This comes even as Russia warns that there will be no end to the war until it achieves its military aims. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov says the war would end at the negotiating table once the special military operation achieves the goals that the Russian Federation has set. All right, well, meanwhile, tensions continue to rise on the Korean peninsula. This is where North Korea has reportedly fired a ballistic missile towards South Korea's eastern waters. Seoul has not offered any details as to what type of weapon was fired and how far it flew. The launch comes 3 days after the U.S. flew nuclear-capable bombers and stealth jets near the Korean peninsula. This was for a joint training with South Korean warplanes. It is an action that North Korea typically labels as an invasion rehearsal. In a major diplomatic move in West Africa, Burkina Faso's government has expelled the top UN official in the country, and it asked her to leave the country immediately. Barbara Manzi is the United Nations resident and humanitarian coordinator in the nation. She was declared persona non grata. No reason was given in the statement for her expulsion. But Burkina Faso's foreign minister said on Friday on state television that Ms. Manzi had raised the alarm about insecurity in the capital, and this was without providing evidence. Ms. Manzi is an Italy native with extensive experience at the UN. Iran's ongoing response to anti-government protests continues to receive international criticism. In the latest move, the German government says it is formally suspending export credit and investment guarantees for business in Iran. Authorities in Iran have sought to stamp out the demonstrations and ramp up pressure on critics. Since the protests began, the U.S. and European Union have imposed additional sanctions on Iran for its brutal treatment of demonstrators. As countries around the world continue to face the fallout from economic turmoil, the UK's Conservative government is refusing demands from public sector workers for substantial pay increases. Travelers are facing delays at UK airports as government employees who check passports go on strike. Thousands of nurses, ambulance drivers, and paramedics went on strike earlier this week. Public sector workers are calling for better pay amid the cost of living crisis, which has forced thousands to change up their shopping habits. South of our border, a measure of inflation that is closely watched by the U.S. Federal Reserve slowed last month. A report from the Commerce Department shows that prices rose 5.5% in November from a year earlier. Now, this is down from a revised 6.1% increase in October. It is another sign that a long surge in consumer prices seems to be easing, at least in the United States. All right, moving to China now, where experts are predicting that the next few months will be difficult. This comes as the latest coronavirus variant continues to spread throughout the country, despite its zero-COVID approach. Between 1 and 2 million deaths are forecasted next year, with the population under-vaccinated and the country short on hospital capacity. It's not clear exactly how large the current outbreak is, as China has reduced testing and stopped reporting most mild cases. But there are widespread reports of absences from work, shortages of fever-reducing medicine, and staff working overtime at crematoriums across the country. Back in the U.S., a major winter storm slamming much of the country has left thousands without power, canceled flights, and created dangerous driving conditions. Richard Otto at the U.S. National Weather Service says the Northeast is getting the worst of it. He says communities near the Great Lakes will see the largest impact from the storm. This comes as lake effect pressure drops have prompted a massive dip in temperatures. Well, amid all this winter weather and travel delays, if you're looking for something to keep yourself entertained over the holidays, this year's top hit movie is available for streaming. Top Gun: Maverick was the top-grossing movie in theaters this year, and it's now available to watch at home on Paramount+. The Top Gun sequel earned more than $1.4 billion worldwide in theaters. Well, I know what I'm doing tonight. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. For more news on demand, be sure to visit our website, thenewsforum.ca, and make sure to follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also watch all of our commentary, programming, and interviews on the News Forum YouTube channel. All right, thanks for joining us today on the Forum Daily News, and we'll see you again next time. Take care, Canada. Happy holidays.